I'm live. Today is Sunday. It's the 30th of April, 2023. And I'm reading out of Sir Moses Was Born. And it is the story about Moses. This chapter I am in now is called The Heart of Ramoses. Moses has been born now, and we have been going along with the birth. We are now in the middle of this chapter, coming to the end. Karadan, that's Ramoses' oldest brother, and then the story is told from the view of Nebunefer, also called Neb, who is the older son of Ramoses and abdicated he didn't want to be Pharaoh because he loved Sensen more than Egypt. Sensen unfortunately died, but Karadan and Nebunefer are both there to make the best of this situation. Karadan's recent description of Ramoses as a moon-struck boy seemed particularly inapt, for he was obviously in the grip of some violent and unpleasing emotion. "She won't marry me," he said, "and for that reason, because I am Pharaoh." "Very sensible of her not to insist on marriage," said Karadan. "But I, Pharaoh, insist on it. How dare she refuse to become my wife, merely because I'm not the soldier that I pretended to be?" He stalked off towards the straw stack. "I will talk to you here. I wish to keep the gate in sight in case she tries to run away, or something equally ridiculous." I caught Pempy's eyes and found it difficult not to smile as she said, "Ramoses dear, what excuse does she give for such an improbable reluctance?" "That is entirely a personal matter between myself and Habakkuk, for reasons which appear adequate to her, and which are entirely nonsensical. She wishes my son, to be brought up as though his father were a farmer or a fisherman. She has been gracious enough to admit that she does not wish him to live in one of the Hebrew villages. She pointed out that as her father was also Egyptian, she did not want him to suffer the same slights for mixed blood as she suffered herself. My son, ashamed of his Egyptian blood." Karadan gasped as though he had swallowed a fly. "Ashamed of being Egyptian?" "Yes. Odd, isn't it?" "Let me take them both to the living waters," I suggested, hoping I did not sound too eager. "Ned, don't be a fool. For the first time," he glanced at Apu. "No, for the second time in my life, I've found someone with whom I'm happy, and nothing is going to take her away from me, not even her own stupid pride. But what am I going to do? I've implored her to marry me. I've argued and shouted and cajoled, but it seems she's determined to make me see her only furtively, as though I were a timid man whose wife had forbidden him to visit his concubine. Instead of a most ferocious man whose wife's jealousy in no wise disturbs him." He glanced at Pempy and then permitted himself a smile. "Pempy, could you talk to her?" "With the greatest pleasure, dear Ramoses, though I doubt if my eloquence would prevail when yours has been unsuccessful. I may have broken the news a little abruptly. About my being Pharaoh, I mean. In much the same situation, Eri remained perfectly calm. But Habakkuk was extremely upset. At first she thought I was joking, and then she began to cry. Then the boy cried too. It's difficult to remember he is almost a god when he bawls like a calf with a belly full of wind." He looked at us morosely, as though daring us to smile. Then he stood up, shaking wisps of straw from his kilt. "Pempy had better come and see her tomorrow. I shall go back to her now. The boy likes me to be there when she gives him his bath." It was Bintanta instead of Pempy who went to visit Habakkuk the following morning. Karadan, Pempy, and I engaged in endless and futile speculations as to how best we could protect the son of Horus, from the dangers which the stubborn refusal of his parents to agree seemed likely to bring upon him. Ramoses will never be able to visit her discreetly. He doesn't know the meaning of the word, said Caradan. Almost I am persuaded that he had better take desperate measures and declare Habaka the great royal wife. Bintanta may be able to convince her mother that it is a decision of the gods. As Nefer has always had an almost excessive awe of Horus. None of the secondary wives would be sufficiently presumptuous to be openly jealous of a woman who holds a title that he gave only to Nefertari. If she won't become a secondary wife, she certainly will refuse to be a queen, said Penpy. How could she be a queen? Poor child, a Hebrew of 15. The world would laugh at Egypt. Only half Hebrew, Caradan reminded her. It is a tragedy that the half is not paternal, for then we could pretend that it did not exist. Eri would have refused to be a queen, I said. She always knew that Ramoses wanted to be loved as a man, not as Pharaoh. I'm glad that no one has suggested that I kidnap Habaka and the boy. The living water has certain magical defenses, but they would be unlikely to withstand the armies of Egypt led by Pharaoh in person. My comment was received in gloomy silence. The horses of Ra's chariot appear to be lame, said Penpy, for never has the sun travelled so slowly across the sky. We were all too agitated to sleep during the noon hours and found ourselves drifting disconsolately towards the straw stack. It was there that Apu came to announce that we were summoned to the royal presence. Ramoses looked benign, if a trifle self-conscious, was sitting with Habaka on his knee under a flowering acacia. His son slept placidly on Bintanta's lap. For the first time I knew why Apu found it so odd that none of us could visualize them as an ordinary family. Until then, I had not realized that Habaka was exceedingly beautiful. Caradan adopted towards her a somewhat uneasy compromise between the deference due to a queen, the informality suitable between close relations, and the rather formal graciousness expected of a distinguished guest when visiting his social inferiors. Penpy took the easier course of admiring the baby, substituting bird-like noises for the more masculine words of praise which I employed. I must admit, my dear nephew, that you were a remarkably handsome child, even when only a month old, though I may have been prejudiced. I think you will be glad to hear, said Ramoses, that when it seemed that fool's pride and fool's humility were going to triumph over the happiness of Habaka and myself, he paused to smile fondly at his love, who kissed him with the spontaneity of a child. Hathor, through her emissary Bintanta, came to our rescue. I looked at Bintanta, but she carefully averted her eyes. For a moment I must confess that I thought the solution to our apparently insoluble problem was inspired only by feminine subtlety. But Bintanta rapidly convinced me that it was only natural that in the birth of a divine child both a god and a goddess would mutually be concerned. He waited for the statement to be absorbed by his audience and then continued. At first, as you may remember, I did not take into consideration the dangers to which my son, our son, would be exposed if it were known that at birth he had already been chosen as my royal heir. But even these dangers, terrible as they might be, were not sufficient to allow me even to contemplate being separated from the woman on whom, although she has refused to wear the white crown, I have conferred in perpetuity the title of the keeper of the king's heart. The interpretation of dreams, difficult as this may be on certain occasions, seemed relatively easy when we sat beside this problem. I think I may say without self-flattery that had it been humanly possible to guess the answer to this riddle, I should have done so myself. Caradan began to look less anxious. This Ramoses was one he knew and could understand. It is curious, said Ramoses, how one is constantly surprised by the wisdom of the gods, so all-embracing and yet apparently so simple. As all of you know, Bitanta is my eldest and beloved daughter. I hope to see her soon, her son, succeed me. That hope is now fulfilled. Her son will succeed me, her son and mine. I could see that Caradan and Pempi shared my sudden alarm. Ramoses was certainly not intoxicated with wine, but was he with vain glory? Surely he knew that even if he married Bintanta, she could not give him a son. Or had he ruthlessly decided that she must make the attempt, even if she died in the process? Ramoses laughed, the clear, entirely same laugh of a man who is delighted because his audience has reacted in exactly the way he intended. Hathor, the great mother, has no intention of inflicting upon Bintanta a dangerous and perhaps fatal ordeal. Her plan is much more pleasing. He turned to his daughter and said fondly, "Perhaps you would prefer to tell them yourself, my dear child." The baby squirmed, and Bintanta put him over her shoulder, patting his back until he brought up his wind. It is really very simple. Once it has been made clear by a goddess so wise as Hathor, she said, "Father wants to be able to see Habakkuk and my little brother as often as they wish, without anyone being jealous. No one bothers to be jealous of me. Few women are jealous of another who has neither a lover, a husband, nor a child. So, instead of his being Prince Ramoses, the son of Pharaoh and the son of Habakkuk, he will be my son, named after his illustrious grandfather and Habakkuk's nursling." "Hathor shows a remarkable disdain of the convention," said Caradan. "Pharaoh's eldest daughter, the Princess Bintanta, priestess of Hathor, suddenly announcing that she has a son, though no husband." Bintanta laughed. "Hathor can also at times be expedient as a vizier, dear uncle. I have often been pitied for my barrenness. What is more likely than that I should adopt a child, a baby, especially a baby given into my arms by Isis?" "More goddesses," said Faradin fretfully. "Why Isis? As vizier, you should be well acquainted with a custom by which women who have been too lavishly provided with children set an unwanted baby adrift on the river as an offering to Isis." "A disgraceful custom," said Caradan. "I've done my best to prevent its continuance, but I fear without signal success." Your failure is provident, for my father will cut some reeds and fathom them into a small but reliable boat to accommodate Moses. He will be set adrift." She smiled reassuringly at Habakkuk. "In a very shallow water and well guarded by Apu. I, with court ladies and attendants whom I shall select for their indiscretion and propensity for gossip, will discover Moses and declare my intention to adopt him. By a fortunate coincidence, Habakkuk, my devoted handmaid, whom I brought back with me from Punt, has just suffered the loss of her baby. She will be wet nurse to the son whom Isis has sent to comfort me." "It might be believed," said Caradan slowly. "By all the gods, I begin to believe it myself." "So do we all," said Ramoses. The baby opened his mouth and made a cheerful, though incomprehensible noise. "I think he's trying to say, 'Pharaoh has spoken,'" said Caradan. So this is the end of The Heart of Ramoses. There's one more chapter to go, entitled A Chariot for a Journey.